Hey everyone, today we're joined by David Beckemeyer, host of the Outrage Overload podcast. David is an expert in political polarization and media literacy, focusing on reducing toxic outrage and promoting civil discourse. With insights from social psychology and communication studies, David helps listeners understand the mechanics behind outrage media and offers practical strategies for fostering unity and understanding in a divided world. Welcome, David. I am wondering what inspired you to start your podcast, Outrage Overload.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate you having me on the show. Yeah, so I mean, well, it was kind of look around, right? But I mean, there was sort of, for me, it was you sort of had the 2016 elections, and people were getting pretty riled up about that, and I saw a lot of these, arguments online, and I saw a lot of people, sort of canceling each other or arguing with each other, and even in real life, right? I mean, even in real life, it seems like
Mm,
everybody has a story. They kind of don't talk to Uncle John anymore or whatever, right? And or other kind of relationships have been severed. So I saw that happen with sort of then, and then it ramped up again. We had COVID hit and lockdowns and a lot of fights over uh, COVID policies and whatnot. And again, same kind of thing. You had people fighting about that. Um, and so I'm kind of in the middle of all that. It's around me. I
hmm
see it happening with people around me, and I'm part of it too. I was one of those guys out on Twitter saying stupid stuff, right?
Yeah.
But then as you watch this and see that, like, wait a minute, this is not just people saying stupid stuff on Twitter. Like I say, you're really not talking to like your best friend anymore. This kind of thing,
Yeah.
over politics or over some of these things. And so then that got me thinking about what's happening with us. And I'm kind of a science nerdy sort of guy. And when I looked at what people are looking at this, I kind of discovered there's sort of academics talking about it, but the audience they're speaking to is more sort of academic to academic. So it's two academics going back and forth for an hour and a half. And most of us are kind of out of that loop at some point, like we're not there with them anymore. So I thought, well, maybe I can bring on some of these same people, scientists, practitioners, others that are
Yeah.
looking at some of these problems and make it more accessible, kind of make it a little faster paced without going all the way to sort of a 2 minute soundbite on TV or social media. We can actually cover it in enough nuance that, and but without going maybe into full weeds for an hour and a half.
Yeah. Yes. I have found myself guilty of rage baiting, I suppose.
Oh yeah,
You
we
get
all do it.
mad and then you want to tell people you're mad and why you're mad. And it's what upsets me is that those videos are the ones where I will get 10 times the amount of views versus the ones where I'm just being a nice person. you know,
Right.
it's disappointing. So, what kind of guests do you have? I mean, you kind of mentioned the various types, but is that so you're looking at it from a scientific approach? Um,
Yeah, I try to,
with
but I also bring in, so, a lot of it is political scientists, social scientists, psychologists, neuroscience, that area, because there's a lot of people looking at these issues from that perspective. And I also think it helps us kind of understand some of the, like, why do we do the
yeah,
rage bait thing? Like, why do we like it? And all this kind of, and why does it get more likes and all that kind of stuff? So it helps us kind of understand those dynamics. And then I also talk to what I call practitioners. So folks that like have, maybe a nonprofit or other organization out there that are doing sort of boots on the ground work in some way, right? Which I think we lose
okay,
sight of because it's not covered in the media a lot, right? We don't realize there's thousands of organizations that are taking this seriously in a nonpartisan way, trying to bring people together in some way, try to look at some of these problems, try to lower the temperature. And so I try to highlight some of that because, like I say, a lot of us try to bring some of the positive, because that's one of the problems that I've learned in this space is that, or in our situation, is that we have these misperceptions of everything. We have these misperceptions that
mm,
everything's terrible. We have these misperceptions that everybody on the other side is horrible and looks just like the caricature that Fox News or MSNBC gives us. And of course, it's not
right,
true. When you go read real people, you don't see that. And then I also bring in, I kind of sometimes do what I might call sort of adjacency type stuff. So I'm a tech nerd, so I was in tech for many years. So sometimes I'll find these overlaps between tech, and there is beginning to be more and more tech
yeah,
kind of trying to be applied to some of these solutions. So we think of a lot of times all this tech only does the bad stuff, but there are people trying to look at sort of tech for good, if you will.
yeah. I have noticed that there's been an increase in tech and AI being involved in this, and oftentimes for the good, but you like you said, you usually hear about the bad. I had no
Right.
idea that there were other organizations out there working towards this at all. It's
Yeah, I just got back from it's their first ever in person um, summit. So they in the past have done these sort of online. So they did big groups, sort of in a big giant Zoom call over a day or two. This one we did
Mhm.
live at first one live is the Listen First Project is who organized it, and Listen First Project has a number of member organizations of which I'm one, and it's called the Listen First Coalition, basically, and I think they have about 500. But experts have recognized like thousands of organizations doing this. But at this summit, there was, I don't know, I never heard the final head count, but 70-ish, 100-ish people there representing
Mhm.
almost that many organizations. And we all got to sort of meet in person and look at how are people looking at these problems and what are they doing in their communities and things like that. So it's like you say, a lot of us don't even know. I wouldn't have known all that was out there had I not been participating in this organization for a while.
Yeah. You mentioned being part of your community, and I was just talking to one of my friends about all the hate that's out there, and she made a similar point that we need to start getting to know people in our community again, and instead of assuming who we think they are online on the town Facebook page, actually talk to them and have a discussion with them. And because you'll find that you have a lot more in common with them than you realize.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certain. I'm no. I want to sort of point out. I've probably read dozens and dozens of research papers in this space, and I've had over 100 interviews of experts, in these categories that I have on the show. And so I've
Yeah.
obviously learned a lot, but I still want to make sure, like, I'm not the final word on everything here, but I definitely learned a lot over this time. And one thing that surfaces a lot, and it was a major theme of this bridging summit I just went to in the DC area at Mount Vernon, is that it takes more than dialogue and talking, and a lot of it starts, like you say, in community. It starts with working together, getting to talk and meet with real people. So you're all kinds of people are going about that all kinds of different ways. Everything from
Mhm.
Service Year Alliance, which is doing like years of service work, and also just all kinds of community work where organizations come in and help communities identify problems that they can go address together, and then you have to sit down and work with someone on a problem you both think is important. You're going to learn about each other. You're going to realize they're real people. They have kids. They go to the same schools. They care about the same pothole you do. There's
Yeah.
so many things, like you say, that where we can find commonality, and you're going to be differences, right? And
Mhm.
and in these situations where you have a shared goal like that, is you will work through those differences, and you'll come away with a lot of skills and understanding that, like we say, all these stereotypes, all the stereotypes have a grain of truth, right? But you find
Yeah.
out like real people are much more nuanced than that. And there's many situations when you actually go through that, you find, okay, I'm not any closer to agreeing with this person on these 7 issues or whatever, right? But I will defend them for having the position they have. I will also defend them if people attack them in these kind of brutal ways that we see online and stuff like that. And I will attack
Mhm.
them. I will defend them for people that sort of attack them as being like a bad person and having bad intent. I mean, they just see the problems differently, and they see the solutions differently. They see how to get there differently, right? But I
Mhm.
think this is where we really get into where we talk about. I mean, don't talk about it, but when we see it, this increase in political violence, one way you get there is by starting to just see people as kind of evil and with bad intent and this kind of
Mhm.
stuff, and not just sort of seeing the world differently, but having really bad intentions and bad morals, and you sort of just bundle everybody into those groups. And that's where that's how we get to these situations where we start seeing violence as an option, because I can't get them to change their mind, and look how bad they are, and they're doing these bad things. And this starts to sound, suddenly violence starts to sound reasonable, and we don't want to go there.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know if you've run across this at all, but when I was in school for my master's, it was a political science degree with a focus on environmental policy. So we talked a lot about passing environmental policy, and we discussed staging protests or demonstrations and stuff like that. Um, but there were hints of like, well, sometimes it might be okay if you use violence. And I'm like, I don't think we should be teaching that though. Do you come across that at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's a school of thought that you know, some things were achieved and it involved violence to get there. You could think about union strikes and things like that. Um, and maybe probably you could probably come up with others. Obviously, we had the revolution against the British, um,
Mhm.
but what we find historically when we look at things, I mean, generally that's not the most effective way to affect change, right? Generally, you build consensus, and especially in a liberal democracy, a republic like ours, you build consensus, and the people eventually have their voices heard. And when you look at the successful ways of doing that, it violence wasn't the best way to do it. And you look at some of these ways when violence was involved, many times we hear about these stories where it kind of worked in some
Yeah.
definition, but you kind of miss all the times that didn't work, right? All it resulted in is a new regime or something,
Hmm.
that's maybe worse than the one before, and you just to continue the cycle, right? So yeah, you definitely see it. There's definitely a school of thought like we're out of options, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
a lot of us are trying to show people, that kind of thinking is what gets us in trouble.
Yeah. How would you suggest we change our minds to transition to give more attention to positive things instead of negative things? Because I think once you get in that cycle, it's hard to break. I'll find myself doom scrolling and then it's like, "Hey, you are wasting your time. You've got plants to water, like you've got stuff to do instead of putting yourself in a bad mood." And I can put my phone down, but I catch myself doing it and I try to be aware. For the people who aren't aware, I can't imagine h- how it's ruining their day and their outlook on life.
Yeah, it's absolutely a challenge because there's so many folks, um, with incentives to sort of use all of our uh, dinosaur emotions against us, right? And we
Mhm.
fall, it's pretty natural. Humans fall into this pretty fast. We all do it. There's nobody that has, like, it's not a thing that the right does. It's not a thing that the left does. Like, we're all guilty of these. We all have the same brains. We all have the same, we all suffer from a lot of these same tendencies, right? And the
Mhm.
people with these bad intent kind of know how to do that. It's not that hard. Like, you can pull us into it. So it's right there to be had everywhere you are. So yeah, a lot of it's, and one thing I've found is the most effective is if we're going to sit around and wait for sort of our politicians to lead this in the right direction, it's not going to happen. It's got to come from sort of the bottom up, in some way. It's got to come from us starting to do this in ourselves, with ourselves, and
Mhm.
then with folks on our side. You have a lot more influence with people on your side than you do with somebody who disagrees with you, right? Or somebody's on, quote unquote, sees you as the other on the other side. You don't have as much.
Yeah.
So we spend all our energy saying stuff to our side that's the message we want the other side to hear. Well, that's not getting us anywhere, right? Your side probably already thinks it, and the other
Mhm.
side is never going to see it. And if they did see it, they're not going to take it seriously. So a lot of it can start with ourselves, right? But then you go quickly to your local community, right? We talked a little bit earlier. You mentioned it before. Getting to know neighbors, getting involved in community things more, because, like you said, you're going to get a better nuanced perspective of real people, and it's really hard, right? Because it can be really uncomfortable, especially
Yeah.
if you've been in your bubble for a long time and you go start to talk to somebody that has different views. They're going to say a thing that's like, or you're going to, maybe the other way around, you're going to say a thing that you think, in our mind, this is how human brains work. We just sort of assume because we came to this conclusion, it's just natural, like everybody also
Mhm.
thinks this way, right? So,
Yeah.
and in our bubbles, everybody kind of does think that way. So we can say these things, and other people go, "Yeah, that sounds good." But then if you get outside that bubble and you say this thing that to you is so natural, how could anybody see the world a different way? And you say the
Uh-huh.
thing, and they're like, "Well, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense to
Yeah.
me." And your
Yeah.
mind just sort of breaks. It's like, well, there's something wrong with you if you're not seeing it my way, right? And that's kind of where our
Yeah.
brain goes right away. So building some skills in that, which can be difficult. I'm a certified moderator with an organization called Crossing Party Lines, where we hold
Okay.
these dialogues online, so you can jump on a Zoom call and get some practice with these kind of conversations in basically a quote unquote, sort of safe environment. It's not totally safe. You're going to be feeling hurt or something in a Zoom call, but they're
Yeah.
moderated. And so there's guardrails and boundaries and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean, you'll win your argument. In fact, that whole conversation isn't about winning. It's just about everybody sharing and everybody learning how to listen, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I think so. So that's one thing. You talked about shutting off your phone. I mean, that's one thing too. You can just spend less time. Maybe even put guardrails on it, like, "Hey, I'm going to doom scroll only this long." you know?
Yeah.
And then you talked about maybe finding some more positive things. I wish that was easier to do.
Mhm.
We've talked a lot, like folks trying to do some of those kinds of things. Like, can we find a more positive, news outlet somewhere that would sort of assemble some of these more positive things? And I think the more in common people try to do that, and the all sides people try to do that as well. So you can kind of look up what they do online and see if, because I think they put
Okay.
out like and there's another one I'm not remembering now that puts out like a daily, here's 3 good things that happened today. And not only 3 good things, but
Oh.
like 3 sort of surprising things. Like, maybe this Democratic senator or something did something that's kind of out of character, and maybe he put
Mhm.
a Republican in a positive light or something like that, or vice versa, right? Stuff you wouldn't, the kind of stuff we don't hear about very much, because we
Yeah.
mostly only hear when they're telling us how terrible the other side is, right? So some of that kind of stuff. But so that's a challenge, like trying to seek out that kind of good information, because of
Yes.
course the news is trying to give us all the other stuff. But people often talk about sort of getting out of your bubble, and even that could be kind of hard, because you know you can get frustrated when you go read, let's say you're on the left and you go read Fox News or something. You can also get frustrated from that, because you're
Mhm.
seeing them say all these things that you think are wrong, and they're lies, and they're incorrect. So it didn't actually lower the temperature very much. So trying
Yeah.
to find a little bit more balanced stuff, maybe a Wall Street Journal story, maybe, you know, if you're on the right, maybe a Washington Post. But again, you might be kind of mad because it's going to look like they're maybe spinning it,
Mhm.
which sometimes they are, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I think we have this idea that everybody's out there telling lies, but really there's just a lot of narrative creating, right? They're not always
Yeah.
telling bald-faced lies. Sometimes they do. It's more about what they leave out, I think, is what usually is making it more like a red alert kind of thing, because they leave out, like, they'll say this thing happened, and then you find out later when you look into it, okay, that thing happened, but also this, and they also said that, and there was this
Mhm.
other thing. And so when you really put them all together, okay, it's not that bad. Like, it wasn't that big of a thing
Yeah.
that everyone tried to make it into. So that can be really hard. It's a challenging landscape. But I would say start locally, start with yourself, start with people on your side. Like, call them out,
Mhm.
even if it's polite, one-on-one, not call them out in public. But like, hey, dude, that thing you said about that thing, that's going to make people kind of mad. Maybe there's another way to say that next time, and maybe even give them examples. Maybe you can have Chat GPT help you write a less toxic version of that thing, that maybe you could have said this, and
Mhm.
then there's probably a better chance someone on the other side might actually, take something away from it, and someone on your side maybe won't get so riled up about it for no reason. So
Right.
I think that's a big one, is we don't spend enough energy. And you mentioned it before that we started, that you try to talk to folks on your own side sometimes to get them to chill out a little bit. That's one of the hardest messages for me to get out to people on my show, is when we talk about, I do a lot of these man on the street interviews. I'm talking forever. I'm sorry.
Okay.
we
No,
do
you're
these men
fine.
on we do these I do these man on the street interviews where I just take somebody, and ask them some general questions, about like their media habits and things like that. And
Uh-huh.
um, I never, well, a couple of interesting things I've learned about that. One is, I never ask anyone their political affiliation, yet they always tell me at some point. Like, they
Mhm.
always feel compelled to tell me their political. It's interesting that it's so much of our identity. We want to make sure we get that out there somewhere in the conversation, but I never ask. But the other piece about that conversation is I just go into 100% listen mode, right? So I don't push back, and I may probe some more, like, try to understand what they're saying, but I don't really push back and
Mhm.
say, and you can see this change in people as you start to do that, where they aren't expecting that, right? They're so used to it's almost like they say the thing and then stop for a second to see what I'm going to say back, right? And then
Yeah.
when you don't say anything back or don't push back on it, they're like, "Wow, that's weird." And then sometimes they mistake it for maybe tacit approval, but you really see them open up and become more willing to share their views and get more comfortable in it. And what it shows to me is how used to we are having, like, confrontation about anything we say, right? We're expecting a fight, especially if we say something
Mhm.
that's, kind of a deeper held thing that we don't always share. And we say that thing and we're kind of just waiting for someone to attack us. Now, what's he going to say to this one, right? And when it doesn't happen, you really see this change in people. So I've learned a lot from that, we're definitely sort of keyed up for a fight.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. While you were talking
I know
about
I said a lot there. Sorry.
no, you're fine. You're fine. I it made me think about a lot of different instances and a lot of different things, and I'm sure my audience is tired of hearing me say this, but I have voted both ways. And so it was interesting where I kind of shifted to a different direction, but because I was in school, I was a vegetarian, everyone assumed that I was on the left. And then someone else was like, "No, she's a Republican." And it's like at that point, because that was, I think, the 2016 election era, and it was like, well, but I've never called myself a Republican before though either, because I didn't I guess I didn't have a label for myself. In Iowa to caucus, you do have to register a certain way. So I am a registered Republican right now, and I don't like that. That
Yeah.
you're having to put yourself in a box. But this also made me think of my conservative friend and my liberal friend back in the COVID era. They were fighting about ivermectin, and the conservative friend was taking it, and the liberal friend was jumping down his throat about like, you can't be taking horse dewormer, blah blah blah. And it's like, wait a minute, why are you assuming that he didn't get the human prescription, for it? But then there was another assumption from him. So they were both coming at this conversation with assumptions without actually knowing what's the actual what's actually happening. It's
Hmm.
almost like they're arguing for no reason because they failed to actually try to understand what the other person was saying. And I think, like you said, that people are so geared up for confrontation, for arguments, that they're not even taking a minute anymore to think like, okay, well, how did you mean that? Like you said, to push back to get a better understanding. They're just ready for their response.
Yeah. Right. And I think this is another opportunity where we have to force yourself to spend more time listening when you do go into those dialogues, because one of the challenges about our natural tendency is we know they have got the wrong idea, so we're going to convince them the right idea. And so our sort of go
Hmm.
in with this motivation that somehow we only win if we change their mind. And I think there's a better mindset if you can try to adopt it of, and I talk about it kind of like the idea of, let's go in this like a detective story, like, and then we're on the same page. I sort of have a shared goal. Like let's play like detectives and try to understand why we see this differently, as opposed to me. I only so then we could both win because we could both learn something from it and
Hmm.
come away understanding better how the other person sees it. Because if you set yourself up that your goal is to persuade them to change their mind, it's almost assuredly not going to work, especially if that's your main goal. And what you're going to start doing is throwing Fox News or MSNBC, Fox factoids out there.
Hmm.
That's not going to work for anybody, right? It's not going to get you anywhere. So you're almost set up for this conversation to fail. So if
Yeah.
you can change your mindset a little bit to, let's see if we can go together to both understand better about why we see it differently, and and maybe even set some other guardrails, like I will listen for 5 minutes or whatever, as long as you also
Hmm.
agree to listen for 5 minutes, something like that. Because the big problem is we spend so much time talking, and this is what's happening on social media. Everybody's talking, especially on social media, and
Hmm.
nobody's listening, right? And everybody thinks somebody's listening. You're all just shouting into the void.
Yeah. Yeah. It's again, if you aren't on, it's like you're entering into a whole different world when you jump online. And it's like, okay, well, did any of what I just said or anything even just matter? Because put the phone down and walked away, and it didn't actually change anything. Of course, when you're inciting violence or whatever, and then causing people to go out into the real world and do bad things, that's a little bit different. But I I don't know how to. I do like your idea about okay, I'll listen for 5 minutes, and then you listen for 5 minutes, so then you can at least get the point across without interrupting and arguing. I think that
You know,
that would go a long way for a lot of people.
yeah, and some people even take it further. Like And if you're already having a if you have the opportunity to have a conversation like that, and you're able to mix it with physical movement, like if you go on a walk together, there's
Mhm.
like some neuroscience about that says right off the bat we're kind of doing something together. We're walking, we're physically doing a thing, and it actually
Yeah.
helps, kind of make you more receptive to that person. So if you can actually go for literally a walk and have that conversation, and with sometimes, you could even think about, well, the first time we do this, I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to really push back at all. Like, I'll just let you have the whole conversation. And then at some point, though, I'm going to turn that around and say, okay, I've given you 3 times where I haven't said anything. Are you okay if I now say something back?
Mhm.
So sometimes it can be that much because some people aren't ready to have it, to have that. So if you have the patience and the willingness to do that, you can even take it that far. I wanted to comment on something else that you said too, that,
Yeah.
like you're vegetarian and
Yeah.
you have these other sort of traits and parts about you that then people are going to make these assumptions like, oh, then
Mhm.
therefore you must be. And that's something, there's a lot of science about this, that's something we do a huge amount, right? We have all this kind of signaling that,
Mhm.
as soon as I mean, I had a person on that was like, and this is such a human thing to do, but in their research, they were able to get people to this point where if you liked a pencil, that meant you must also dot, 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 dot. Right. They were able to take something that's totally apolitical, but they were able to kind of group things and group people and show that it's such a human characteristic in us. We would decide something about someone just on whether they like pencils or not, you know?
Yeah.
And so obviously with politics, it's even more so. So this
Mhm.
idea that you have you're one of those people with those cross-cutting views. You said sometimes you vote the other way. You said
Mhm.
you kind of fit these boxes for this one, but then you're really over here. Well, the reality is most of us are like that to one degree or another. But those people that are
Mhm.
like that in a larger way, where they have cross-cutting views, like, I mean, maybe, they're abortion on this side and gun control on that side, and they're, something else. These people with these cross-cutting views are, to some degree, a lot of research shows these may be our saviors, right? If those people can get out there and show that not everybody fits in these boxes, and they can also show their own side, not everybody fits in boxes either, then that they may be a path towards everybody kind of, oh yeah, picking up on this more nuance, that the world is more nuanced than Fox News and MSNBC want to tell us it is.
Mhm.
And that's been shown to be a big factor in reducing sort of the extremes, right? Doesn't mean people agree on everything, doesn't mean we all come to the middle ground and we're always agreeing, but it means we can be in the same room, we can have productive dialogue with people, and we don't hold those really extreme views where we're just so locked in that we're not very flexible. So people like you could very well be our path out of some of this.
Do you see on so I see this happening with Republicans right now. They are actually attacking each other because they might not be holding the view. I see there's a lot of fighting about Israel, a lot of back and I guess they're not fighting, but the response to Charlie Kirk's assassination, some are like, this is war, and others are saying we need to forgive. And it's and I guess I'm not really seeing them fight about that, but the Israel topic is a huge thing with Republicans right now on whether or not we should be supporting Israel as much, and I think it's ripping the party apart. Do you see that on the left as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
both parties suffer from this sort of ideological purity test kind of problem. And I think Democrats and the left have been even harsher at this historically, or certainly over the last few decades, where like if you violate one of these norms one time, you are like out, like you can never recover, you can never get back. And I think the right has been a little more forgiving, like you violate a norm, but as long as you come back and say, hey, either I was wrong or I now support this other thing, they just invite you back in, right? Whereas Democrats are like,
Mhm.
once you broke one thing, you're out, you can never come back. But both sides suffer this ideological purity
Mhm.
thing, and it's not good for us, right? Because our I love that our politicians, particularly Congress, um, you know we have these ones we love because they're, I mean, maybe you or I don't, but a lot of people love these ones that just go grandstand. They get on their soapbox and they yell and cheer. They tell us how terrible the other side is, blah blah blah. And then you look at their record; they haven't actually done anything. Right? They didn't propose
Yes.
any laws. They didn't try to ever talk across the aisle. If you rate them on what their responsibility is by the Constitution, they aren't doing any of the things. They aren't doing oversight. They aren't creating laws. They aren't working with the other side. They aren't doing any of the things that the Constitution puts them in charge with. But we love them because they're yelling and screaming all the time. So some of it comes back on us, right? That we
Hmm.
are not holding, and then so we do that, and then we go, but Congress isn't getting anything done. You're why Congress isn't getting anything done. You keep
Yes.
voting for these people that just stand there and scream and shout all day. And I'm saying that's true for the left and the right.
Yeah. Yes, I wish that there were scorecards
Yeah.
for politicians, because yes, you're right. It's, oh, they're out there fighting for us. No, they're just screaming, and then they're not, and then now they're going on a summer break for a month and not doing anything. Um, and that also did remind me. You mentioned working across the aisles, so I remember there was something that AOC and Anna Paulina Luna worked on together, and I came across it, and no one else was reporting on it. And it's like, well, why isn't this getting attention? But what was was it a Twitter page or a website that you mentioned that posts 3 positive things per day?
I think it's like an email list, so you get
Oh,
like in your
okay.
email every day, you get, or maybe it's not every day, but maybe once a week, you get like a little list of positive things that happen.
Hmm. I wish that there was more attention brought to the ones that are actually trying to work with people. I do see that John Fetterman is getting a little bit more attention for his kind of crossing the aisles, whether it be positive or negative. It kind of depends
Right.
on the person. But I do appreciate that he's actually trying to to understand the other side. And
Yeah, and I think somebody like Spencer Cox, he's a Republican in Utah. He's sort of had a reputation for doing this for a
okay.
while, and it's challenging within your own party, right? Because if you take this view that I'm going to tell you the other side isn't evil, now I'm going to be seen as evil on my side, right? My people are going to
Yeah.
complain at me because I'm not screaming at the other side enough. So it's kind of
Yeah.
brave of these politicians willing to do it. There is a site, and I'm forgetting the name now, but it's I want to say it's like legislative. I forget what it is, but there is a website that does track some of this, and it
Oh,
it it
okay.
talks about mostly about their legislative effectiveness. It doesn't really talk about their role in oversight, because that's also supposed to be a role of Congress, by the way.
Hmm.
And then they just like they've seen to let that go, like they don't seem to do any oversight anymore. But and I
Yeah.
forget exactly what it is now, but I'm sure I can get it to you for your show notes.
Okay.
And then I
Great.
also saw a new one that I don't know a lot about yet, but it's it's called, what is it called? It's called Bridge Grades, and what they're doing
Okay.
is specifically rating members on their how much they do work across the aisle. So it's totally
Okay.
nonpartisan. It doesn't even tell you. I mean, it doesn't even focus on whether they're blue or red. It just rates them on how much are they, proposing bills that then have a co-signature or a endorsement from someone on the other side, stuff like that. So you can
Hmm.
very quickly look at, see this rating for your congressman, and the S do it for senators. But yeah, and it's called Bridging Grades, and that one's interesting. I mean, I think we kind of have to take all these in the aggregate and kind of look at all of them, but it doesn't hurt to
Yeah.
look at like my guy in my area is like grade F. Like, he's
Oh no.
he's he's supposed to be this, liberal guy that's just great for the world, but then you look at this, he's like a grade F on his bridging capability, and they call those dividers, right? So people that you either get like an AB score or a CF score or something like that. There's sort of no middle ground. You're either on the upper side, which makes you a bridger, or you're on the lower side, which makes you a divider. And he's like the worst kind of divider.
Oh,
He's like an
really?
F. And he wins every
Yeah.
time. Like, he can't lose because it's a Democratic area. Like, half the time, nobody even runs against him.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out because that would be interesting to look at. I so the government is the government shut down right now? I saw
Yeah, I
that they
think
were
it
gonna
is.
revisit it. So I saw that Rand Paul voted against the continuing resolution, and and Thomas Massey will do that as well, almost every time. And I see they get attacked on the right for it so bad. And it's like, why are we, whether I agree with him or not, why are we attacking people for voting how they believe? I it's I and I like that they do that. Again, whether I agree with what they w- with it or not. I do like that they're not. caving, like John Fetterman, they're not caving
Right.
to the pressure of their party. They're voting how they believe.
Yeah, and that needs to become more of a norm. I mean, I get it. They want party unity and they want all these things, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's party unity, especially with our two-party systems that's really got everything locked down. So it's very hard for third parties to make any inroads. Um, the more they do that, just the more nothing happens. Again, we create this system that does these things, and then we complain that they don't get anything done. Well, it's because of this, that they're so locked into their own side, and then they never want to. The founders. You probably have studied this. I've listened to some of your episodes about this. That, I mean, the founders built this country on the idea that people could get in a room and work through their differences, and they had to, like, our government is designed for it to be hard to get things done on purpose, right?
Yeah.
That way you don't have the sort of majority rule kind of idea. So even when you're in the majority, you have to build coalitions and do the work to get support for these ideas, and that usually means also you're going to have to compromise a little bit. Like, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
probably have to take this piece out and or add this piece in order to build those coalitions, and both sides are going to have to do that. And right now, we as voters, like, compromise has become a bad word. This working across the aisle has become like a bad word, and so I constantly kind of put it back on us, like, we've met the enemy and it's us, right? We have to get better at appreciating how our government was designed to work, and
Mm-hmm.
what has to happen for things to work. We're going to have to give a little sometimes. Like, you can't have this no compromise attitude about everything. It's just, you have to build consensus. And people talk about, like, oh, Democrats needed this, and you see the same thing with Republicans. They needed that to win elections. I'm like, what they need to do to win elections is have popular ideas.
Yeah.
Have ideas people want. Then you'll win election. You won't have to do all these tricks with gerrymandering and all that.
Yeah. 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 That's, I was just thinking about the redistricting this morning, and um, I just don't, and maybe you heard me talk about this. Iowa is just like, I mean, Iowa's a small state, so it's just split into fours. And I guess, in my opinion, that's just the fairest way to do it. But another person had explained to me, well, if there are certain populations all living in a small group, that, like, their voices might not get heard. Um, so I still haven't decided how I think the best way is to go about that to be the most fair. Um, what do you think about it?
Well, I think the right way in general is, the idea of, like, what New York and California has done with these independent bodies, and just taking that to a better implementation, a fuller implementation that it can't be rigged,
Mhm.
as much. So I think that's probably the best approach that we. And it is difficult to have national mandates for that kind of stuff, because we've designed our system to be federated. So states have power to do things the way they want, especially with elections. So we kind of have to figure out if we could mandate something and how that might look. But I think independent commissions are the way to get there, right? Independent commissions
Mhm.
of experts that are going to try to do that fairness thing in a nonpartisan way. And so, and again, everything has its edges. Nothing's black and white. Everything has gray around the edges. So there's going to, even when you have that, you're going to have situations like you do see in New York and California, where even those commissions get accused of unfair play. But I think it would
Right.
be it would be a step in the right direction, at least, to have those kind of commissions. And again, let's add some oversight. Like, start doing your job, Congress.
Yeah. I cannot believe how much they get paid to do so little, but uh
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to tell you about one of my sponsors real quick. Sometimes I get on a roll cleaning or gardening and I need a boost but don't have time for a meal. Big Fork Brand's pork jerky is the perfect choice to keep my momentum, offering high protein snacks for on the go energy boosts. Not only do they offer pork jerky, but they also make pork sticks, bacon sausage, bacon hot dogs, and burger and hot dog sauces. Products come in a variety of delicious flavors, including Thai green curry and maple and brown sugar for the meat options, and gangster and Chicago fire for the sauces. I personally think the original flavor of the pork jerky hits just right after tackling a big chore. It's a little salty and very flavorful. My discount code gives you 20% off your entire order, and it's currently the best deal available. Just visit bigforkbrands.com and enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout.
So, what are some of the most hopeful trends that you're seeing in the way people are responding to outrage culture?
Well, I've been disappointed, as everyone has often, with some of the things that experts have often talked about is this idea that we could have some kind of exterior threat, that was a
Hmm.
shared threat that we'd all sort of find some unity to fight that threat. So COVID didn't do that. It went the other direction. We got more divided over it, and there's a lot of arguments you can make about how that came about that way. But I see these events like the attempted assassination on Trump in Butler last year,
Hmm.
the assassination of the senator in Minnesota, and now the assassination of the successful assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I
Hmm.
thought these moments, I always hoped these kind of moments could be more unifying, that we could start to see it. And so far, it hasn't gone in that direction, right? The
Yeah.
president assassination attempt did for like a little while. There were a few days where people talked about, things have gone too far. We need to drop the temperature. We saw that kind of language happening. Didn't last very long. We saw this a
Hmm.
little bit with 911, with 9/11 back in 2001, where for a while
Yeah.
the country kind of came together and started thinking about working together more. Didn't last that long. Right? Again, didn't last that long.
Yeah.
So I from the from but so I'm hoping that it won't take that. I'm hoping but people often talk about, like I said, the experts often talk about sort of hitting rock bottom, sort of like a drug addiction kind of problem, right? And so
Hmm.
what will Americans see as their rock bottom? And in a nonpartisan way, because it doesn't work if it's just sort of seen as a partisan rock bottom. Like, I'm going to blame this president because the economy went bad, and it'll be fixed because I'll vote for the other side next time. Like something beyond that attitude. Like, that attitude isn't getting us
Yeah.
anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So, but the positive that I'm seeing the most is all this effort, how much energy, how much research is being put into this subject, how much boots on the ground work is being done all around the country, and how many of those efforts are showing promise, right, and showing more than promise. Like, there are situations like Rich Harwood has the Harwood Institute, and they go around to very divided areas and get people to work on a project together. And you've seen
Yeah.
some of these there's another group called Urban Rural Action that's doing that, and they go into some of the most divided places, and get a project where they come up, they help the community come up with a shared problem to work on. So that kind of stuff shows we can do it, right?
Hmm.
um, and but there's a lot of barriers, right? There's the incentives, from, like, we keep talking about, this stuff doesn't make in the news. Nobody's heard of these organizations because it's not making the
Right.
news enough. But it's so if we can start, and I think there's a demand for it too. If you look at the More in Common studies, this is a little bit old now, but it's the research still holds up. There's this idea of what they call a exhausted majority. So there's people that are locked into their sides on each end, but then there's sort of
Hmm.
the rest of us that are more like what you're talking about. Sometimes they cross vote, sometimes they hold issues that you might consider crossing sides, and
Uh,
and they're just exhausted by all this fighting, right? And it's
yeah.
a vast majority. So if we can kind of bring the exhausted majority, like, to realize there's more people like them. There's this idea in science of, like, um, plural ignorance, where we think nobody else thinks like us, or maybe nobody else sees this thing the same way. um, if we can get that message out, that there's a whole bunch of people that see things like you do, in terms of the frustration with politics, and
Yeah.
if we can really bring that to light. So those are all things that I'm encouraged by. But I have to say, I see that it's still a big challenge, and like I say, a lot of it is us, because we're susceptible to these actors trying to driving us, and we have to get so much better about seeing this stuff and saying, no, don't do that. Like this guy in my district, stop doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, yeah, I think that if we shared more of these positive things and got the word out there for a lot of those. I was just listening to an episode of Dr. Phil's show last night where he was talking about helping a college where the students were all fighting about politics and having them do where they stand across from someone with different views and you have to just okay, well, what do we have in common? Have you had that type of thing? And apparently it was pretty successful doing that. Um, and I do see that all these conservatives are going out there and going to college campuses to talk to students like Charlie Kirk did. Steven Crowder brought his Change My Mind booth back. And I can see how that hope opens up dialogue, but I don't know if it's as effective as projects like you're talking about, where you're actually working together as a group, finding more in common that way. I mean, that would be something, it would be really cool to bring projects like that to a campus.
Yeah, it seems like all the research is pointing to that it's much more durable if you can actually go work together. The conversation is a start, right? And it doesn't
Mhm.
hurt to build those skills. Um, and a group like Crossing Party Lines or others that are out there that's free, you can participate in those conversations. Can help build those skills. They have workshops as well. And so those skills are good. Like they're going to help you in your personal life for sure. And if we all start to just get better at it, and it's really hard, like I said, it's like everything in our nature makes us not want to do it, right? So it's really hard.
Mhm.
But um, but it looks like with most of the research, the talking is like a start. It's a good thing, but what really makes it more durable and having a more lasting impact is to work on projects together somehow. Like find a way to work together on shared find some shared problem you want to work together on and work through it. Like
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people think, well, what I'm going to say, like the thing you're going to work on is like the hardest thing to work on. No, you can set those aside. Like if we think there's just no way we can come to agreement on this one, how about these two? Like we don't have to
Mhm.
put everything aside because we're setting that one thing aside. We can still find stuff to work on, and that starting point then can open up the door. So now I'm ready to maybe talk about some of these harder ones, right? So
Yeah.
you don't have to start with the hardest problem in the room.
Yeah. I think we need to get back to being able to agree to disagree as well. Like
Sure, yeah,
no one has to agree with 100% of what you believe, but I think if we realize that we might not agree on this, but we both think that this is the best. It's not, I'm not believing this to take your rights away or to hurt you or a certain group of people. I'm believing this because I think that that's what's best for people. And I do believe that with certain things, people think that it's just a judgmental thing or I just don't like you peoples or I don't like this type of group, so this is how I feel on this, where it's deeper than
yeah,
that.
yeah. We've sort of trained ourselves to see it that way, and we have to kind of unlearn that. I think,
Mhm.
and beyond just um, agreeing to disagree, I think the other side of it that kind of relates to that pretty closely is we have this idea in our head that somehow if the other person is allowed to share their views, that then somehow that means I agree with them, right? It doesn't. You can do
Mhm.
both things. Like you can try to understand where they're coming from without changing your mind. No one's forcing you to change your mind. Like, okay, maybe they would change your mind. Maybe they have a good story that makes sense, but you don't have to. Like you can keep the
Mhm.
thing. You can still believe the thing you believe, right? I mean, sometimes I think we have this fear that I'm going to hear a thing that might change my mind.
Yeah.
Okay, that might even be true, but you aren't required to. Like you can just believe what you believe, and the other person can believe what they believe too, and those things can exist at the same time. Like you can understand each other better, but not change your position at all. Right? That's
Mhm.
that's okay. Like that works.
Yeah.
You can hold both those thoughts at the same time, and I think it's hard for us to do that because we see this idea of even hearing them somehow makes us less, less of a member of our tribe.
Right. That's I have seen that as well. We need to be listening to each other more,
Well, and
and it
I
needs
think
to
we
be
we
made okay to do that.
yeah, it needs to be made okay to do that, and you know, it's okay to say I don't agree with you, but if you can get to the point where I can sort of see how you came to that conclusion.
Mhm.
But even that, our own side sometimes will call us like an apostate for saying
Yeah.
you can see how the other person thinks that. Like you're not even allowed to have that kind of a thought.
Right. Right. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, and we
it's
need to get
crazy
out of this.
times. Mhm.
And like I say, I mean, so much of it starts with us. I mean, I think if you look at Trump, like I think Trump's a bottom up movement, right? The Republican Party wasn't going to Trump saying, please be our guy, right?
Mm.
This came up from the bottom, right?
They
So
didn't
for the
want him
people,
either
they didn't
at
want him either,
first.
exactly. So, I still don't want him, but I mean, he came from, from up from the bottom. So I think if you look at people that say this, you can't, well, that'll never work. Like, we'll never get anywhere from the bottom up.
Mhm.
Obviously you can, right? The guy's been
Mhm.
president twice. So, I think we have to keep that as a, just a reminder that yes, we can do things from the bottom up.
Mhm. Yeah, that is a very good point. Um, okay, so the other question I had was, how can we teach people to be more critical of the information they see online and in the media? Which you did point that out a bit. I know I personally don't watch Fox News or CNN. I don't watch any of it. I read what what I'm consuming, and I try to do um, both sides, as far as what I'm reading. And sometimes it is very frustrating because it's like, also, like you had said earlier, they might not be lying, but they're leaving out an important part of the story. And sometimes it's like, why do I have to spend so much time getting to the truth of this? But yeah, how would you suggest people be more critical of the information they see?
Yeah, it's a really, so unfortunate that there isn't like a magical place you can send people and say, well, this will always
Mhm.
get you the, quality information or whatever, right? Um,
Mhm.
and so what's the information landscape that we're in is really a challenge for all of us, right? Even people that are pretty good at this kind of thing, it can be a challenge, right? Even the sourcing is
Yeah.
hard. The things like even all these rating sites, right? So they rate sites on sort of reliability and bias and stuff like that. But just remember, that's like an average. That's like an aggregate score. So even somebody that maybe is rated well, let's take like the Wall Street Journal or something, right? They're rated pretty
Mhm.
highly for reliability. I think they lean to the right in terms of those ratings, but they still write garbage sometimes. And
Mhm.
likewise, a publication that's not rated that highly sometimes writes really good stuff, puts out really good stuff, put out a lot of garbage, but they also put out really
Yeah.
good stuff. So it's really hard to just say, listen to, read these three things or listen to these three shows, and you'll get the best perspective out there. Unfortunately, it's really hard. Um, and so and the other challenge sometimes, even the look at both sides things has its flaws, because if I'm getting two versions of garbage, I
Yeah.
still didn't really learn anything, right? I'm still wasting a bunch of time to get two versions of garbage. So it's
Yes.
really a heavy lift for us all. I think there are some good tools that can sort of help. If people know about the 1440 News, it's like a daily newsletter. They do a pretty good
Okay.
job to pick the stuff that is not over the top, biased. Obviously, you're going to land at a page that is on a normal news site, whether it's Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, whatever.
Mhm.
But they try to do a pretty good job to select down to the ones that aren't taking a really hardline partisan stance. And you get a daily email from them listing off, a bunch of things from the day. So that's a pretty
Okay.
good one. Tangle News is sort of a different approach at it. Um, they do typically one issue a day, and they sort of drill down on that one issue, and
Mhm.
they do a good job of surfacing. They call it the what the right is saying, what the left is saying, and then they give their take. Um,
Okay.
and they do a pretty good job surfacing a good sort of general sense of what the left and what people on the right are saying about the topic. And they have, I don't know, they have a hard time describing exactly what they are, but I think you could
Okay.
say that the editors try to be centrist is probably the best way. They're not super partisan, for sure.
Okay.
But all of those words are hard to even define, right? The whole left-right
Yeah.
spectrum is hard to define all that. But
Yeah.
they're a good source for, I think, getting a good sense of what the left and right is saying, and then kind of giving their take. Um, and I think there's another similar kind of thing you can look at called All Sides, that is also a source for a lot of other material that tries to do the same thing, where they sort of put together summaries of what's happening on the left and right,
Mhm.
and give you some background on that. And they typically are picking, pieces of information that are better. Like I say, that's you can't
Yeah.
guarantee it's going to be great. You can't guarantee it's not doing the things we're saying where it left some stuff out. I think one of the big things I always tell people is, especially if it really is getting you riled up, that's the question to step back and ask, what are they leaving out? Because they probably are leaving something out, right?
Yeah.
That's
Right.
one of the best things you can do is, who else is talking about this? And if you can't find any other sources, maybe on the other side or anywhere else, it's probably a semi made up story, like, or there's something
Mhm.
about it that's fishy if only one side is talking about it.
Yeah.
Um, so those are some tricks, but I'm sympathetic because it is a
Yeah.
tough problem. There's no magic answer.
Yeah. When I started doing this, I started in December, and I had no idea it was going to be so much work to just put out like a 10-minute update. Like for example, my episode that I am recording later today, I had 22 pages of notes, and it's down to an eight page script. There's so much crap in there, that it's like, um I mean, a lot of opinions and everything inserted into things, and I try to just do, like, the factual stuff. Sometimes if something's irritating me, I'll put my own opinion in, but,
Yeah.
I had no idea it was going to be so much work, just getting to the facts and the entire picture of each headline that's out there, basically. So,
Yeah. Oh,
I can
it's a
see where
lot of
people
work.
would
Yeah.
get lost. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you also, and maybe this is a place where AI could help a little.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's just logical fallacies in some of these stories, and I think AI could help us point out that kind of stuff. Like when it's in order to create that narrative, sometimes I think
Yeah.
they do some logical fallacies, and I think AI could help with that. So when we talk about
Mhm.
AI being really dangerous potentially, I think that's true. There are potential places where AI could maybe help with some of this.
Yes, I have had where I have, just so much stuff, but it's like, "Okay, well, what's the real story here?" And I just ask Grok, like, "Hey, can you just summarize what's going on here?" And oftentimes, it is different, and it points out, "Oh, well, I didn't hear that part," you know? And then it'll kind of summarize everything. So then I'm like, okay, so I'll put this in my own words, and it does save me some time, and it does help with those stories where it's like there seems to be a spin on this one.
Well, and when there is, which is a lot of times, especially if it's a little bit sort of a controversial topic, the other thing about AI that I worry about, some people say, "Well, I just use AI, take the answer, and I'm all good." But
Mhm.
with something like Perplexity AI, and most of the others are starting to also cite sources. I mean, you'll find
Yeah.
this the sources they picked probably weren't comprehensive, right? And
Uh-huh.
so even I mean, AI can definitely be informing, especially to give kind of a zeitgeist of what the world thinks. That doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily mean that it's a fully, fully
Yes.
nuanced, complete story.
Yes, and I have caught, Grok making mistakes, it took it, like, months to recognize, Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House, type it's like, well, are there no articles that mention that he became Speaker
Right.
of the House? Like, what sources are you pulling? So there are things where I've kind of been like, "No, I think" I'll argue with it, I think you're wrong," and then it'll do, like, a deep search, and then it comes up with better information. So you do have to kind of make sure that you're looking into the sources and what whatever AI platform you're using is being
Right.
thorough enough. So
Yeah.
did you did you happen to listen to the episode with Evan Jakwa, or have you talked to him from the Solutions Party at all?
I have not. I'm a little bit aware of what they're doing, but I'm not super aware of it.
Okay. It's so he mentioned, we were kind of talking about scorecards earlier. He mentioned using a rating service of all of these journalists and news sources, and you get graded like A through F on how factual you are or how often you make mistakes, stuff like that. And I think that could be really helpful for people looking to get their news from reliable sources. I've noticed a lot of people after a certain age are having a really hard time with the internet, with finding out whether they are viewing things that are from a reliable source. I'll get sent like, oh, you should buy these flowers, and it's clearly AI created type type things where I can see that AI is tricking people. And I just thought that was a really good idea that he had of grading your news sources. So hey, this one tends to be unreliable. Maybe don't use that as a source. for people who are kind of just wanting to get their information quick and not have to look into anything. They could just go to that A-rated news source. I don't know how to implement something like that, but
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is, like I said, one of the challenges, like I said, is that these publications, most of the publications, even the ones that are rated highly, put out some bad stuff too, right? And even some of the ones that are rated poorly sometimes put out good stuff.
Mhm,
So that's one of the challenges. I do like the idea of almost rating individual journalists, but again, it's going to be an aggregate because they probably do good stuff and bad stuff too.
yeah,
But so that's a big challenge with all these rating systems. I mean, it's not a bad indicator. It can be a reasonable place to start, but
mhm,
just because somebody has a really high rating doesn't mean they're always only doing really good stuff. And I think we have to also separate opinion pieces from news pieces. So
yes,
just remember, if it's an opinion piece, that the editorial rigor is much different compared to
mhm,
an actual news piece. Typically, I was mentioning the one of the, I forget now, but one of the partisan papers, generally their opinion stuff's sort of garbage, but their news is actually pretty good. So
okay,
it can be hard to
yeah,
kind of keep that in mind. But and that actually, another point of this I want to bring up is, this is another
mhm,
piece that can help kind of think about like the quality of the thing you're reading too, is if nobody has put a byline on it, nobody even wants to put their name on it, then this is probably bogus, like might have been put
yeah,
together by AI or somebody did some cut and pasting. Because you
yeah,
want to see if there's a byline. And if there's a byline, then you can go look at that person a little. What kind of stuff have they written
mhm.
before? Where do they stand on this or that? And you can get some history of that author. So if it has no byline, I would say that's probably garbage.
That's
If no
a
one's willing to put their name on it.
yeah, that's a very good very good point. So, is there anything else that you want to any other point you wanna drive home or anything else that you would like the audience to know about your podcast or anything else?
um, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, this is, as I said, this is a challenging problem, so it can be very intimidating. I would
Mhm,
say start small, right? I mean, I think it's easiest to start small, um, and and don't be intimidated by, for some of us it's overwhelming, right? To say I've got
mhm,
this friend who, or maybe they're a former friend, and we broke the friendship, and maybe you don't even start there. Maybe you start. So that may be a goal. Someday you want to reestablish that friendship or something like that with that person, but maybe that's not where you start, right? Maybe you start somewhere else, building some of these other skills, maybe just talking to people in real life, like you said, meet your neighbors a little bit, get used to um, having some of those conversations, and then maybe you can have a strategy to approach your friend. So I would say start small, start local. I mean, that's
mhm.
the best way to get better at this, and go outside your bubble, of course, locally. Like, I'm
Yeah,
lucky. There was a while I was even thinking, wow, we should move to an area that's more uniform, but I actually really appreciate now that I live in a very purple area. So you can pretty much
yeah,
randomly walk down the street and find people on the left or the right. And I actually really appreciate that now, and appreciate being in a purple neighborhood.
mhm. Yeah, I sometimes I think, I had people delete me, just unfriend me completely because I voted for Trump, and I think about them sometimes, and it's like, we'd been friends for a long time and never had a conversation, and just because of who I voted for threw the friendship away, so I don't know if it's worth repairing, but I sometimes it's tempting to, like you said, just go and stay in your own bubble and where it's comfortable, but, but then as someone who's more centrist, I'm losing all my other friends that most of the time we agree on stuff. There's just certain things that we're not, and and you're missing out on assets, like, even if you don't know the person. I kinda like that my area, you don't also I mean, Iowa's conservative, but I wouldn't say that it's so conservative that it's not similar to what you mentioned, where I don't know how someone voted just by looking at them. I'm gonna talk to somebody on the street no matter what they look like. I really don't care how they voted. I'm gonna be nice to you either way. So we do have that Iowa nice thing going on that I am happy about, but I do think you make a good point that we could be putting ourselves out there a little bit more to try to understand each other instead of fleeing, you know. and
Yeah,
hiding
and
by
it's
our own
hard.
side.
It's definitely hard. It's intimidating. Something you said there, I think, is another really huge one. Is that you know, in this work, it sounds like a platitude or whatever, but I mean, kindness goes so far, right? I mean, so, well, and you're like, okay, I guess I should not be surprised by that, right? But when the science really backs that up, that those, that the community, the bonding that's built through kindness has such an impact to how everything else goes. So that's a great place to start.
Hmm.
Start, and I don't know, you probably noticed this, that I mean, sometimes you're having these conversations with people, and they're so caught up in their sort of politics world. It's like so become so important to their identity and their movement. Like we're talking about, I don't know, fishing, or we're talking about something else,
Uh-huh.
and there's some of them are trying to catch hints. Is this guy left or is he
Yeah.
right? Is this guy left or is he right? They're just trying to find these hints like all the time. And I say the wrong thing, suddenly I'm going to be kicked
Yes.
out of the.
Yes, I think that has gotten so much worse. My husband says that he comes home complaining about someone talking about politics at work, and it's like, why? Why is anyone discussing politics at work? You're stuck there working. Now you're being held captive. I just
Yeah,
think, I think in some settings it's inappropriate as well, but
right.
it's
Well,
really
like I
taken
say, I mean,
over.
it's become so normalized, and I think social media has helped with
Hmm.
that too. That we have these social media political arguments, or some people do, not everybody does, but for the folks that are doing it, that they then carry that into real life sometimes, right? That I'm just going to walk into a room and say something super political, like for no reason. It's like, is that necessary? Like I thought we were having like a birthday party.
Right. Yeah, that's such a good point.
And suddenly everyone's kind of
Yeah.
uncomfortable, even if you kind of agree with
Hmm.
them. You're uncomfortable. Like, did
Yeah,
we
it's
need that right now?
thought we were gonna eat cake soon.
Yeah.
Where's this conversation going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that it's sort of come to that. So anyway, yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
being kind is a great place to start, right?
Yep.
I talked about starting small is being kind, right?
Hmm.
Raising your kids, like, okay, I feel like I can't solve all these big problems that are out there in the world. Hey, raise a good family, raise good children. That's a huge step towards making things better. So even if that's all
Yeah.
you ever do, I say all, but I mean, if that's what you do, if that's your contribution, you don't have to get involved in politics, right? Raise
Yeah.
good kids. It's a great way to spend your time.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, yeah, I appreciate you coming on to the podcast. I think it's a very important topic and great conversations to have. Where can people find your show in it? And you have two?
Yeah, I actually have 3 shows if you count
Three.
like
Okay.
a little thing I do called Outrage Science Bites, which is like, if for
Okay.
folks that don't want to listen to for 45 minutes, it's like a little 10 minutes and under little snippets of some of the science that we talk about. But yeah, the
Yeah.
flagship podcast is Outrage Overload, and the best place to find all this stuff is at outrageoverload.net. And that's also where my contact info is. And I know, as probably in the same boat as me, I love hearing from people. Like, people think, oh, he's a big star, he doesn't want to hear from me. Oh no, I want to hear from everybody, and I will answer every email. Eventually I will get to it, and I will answer it. And also, I have like a speak pipe thing. You can leave me a voice message through that. So I
Nice.
love hearing from people. So if you listen to an episode and you thought, man, he got it wrong, that was terrible, I want to hear that too. Like, this is
Yeah.
great feedback. We as podcasters love this kind of feedback. And I will say, like on my show, as you know, with a podcast, you don't necessarily get the kind of demographic data automatically, but I've done polling, and the self-reporting is, I'm sort of 60-40 blue to red. So I'm pretty proud that I
Yeah.
have a somewhat diverse group. And I will say, the the people on the right that sometimes complain, like, no, I brought too much of my bias in, or I didn't bring the right people in, or there's another way to look at this. They complain, but they support the show. Like, they're so glad to see somebody like trying to bring a balanced perspective to things. I think the world is hungry for that.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. I think everyone should go check it out. I will put the links in the show notes as well. So yeah,
And if you hear
I
something you
love
don't
it.
like, let me know. Let me know. I do want to hear
Yeah.
it.
Sounds good.
Well,
I'm
thank
too
you so
scared to
much.
say that yet, but I probably should. I mean, any contact is better than no contact, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the more, sort of serious it is, the better. If you want to
Yeah.
send me a bad word, that's fine, but it's not. I'm not going to be.
Yeah.
Not going to help me very much. But yeah, if you have some serious uh, critique, I love it. I'd love to hear that stuff. So Yeah,
Sounds
looking
good.
forward to hearing from everybody.
Great. All right. Sounds good. Well, I thank you again for coming onto the show, and I will talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.